If you're a Christian and you're working on your book and you feel like you don't know what you're doing, this video is for you. My name is Abidemi Sanusi. I'm an author of 10 books. I'm currently in the midst of editing my 11th book, and I write for the Christian and non-Christian market. And I've been featured on Forbes, The Guardian, the BBC, and you've definitely seen my devotionals on the Bible app. So let's get to it. The first thing I would like to say to you, I'm sure you guys are probably shocked, surprised that I'm actually using a Google Doc. So here's the thing, when I'm working on my book, I actually use Google Docs to write my books. And I know that sounds shocking because lots of people usually think that I use some kind of fancy software, but for me, I just prefer Google Docs. It's nice and simple. I don't like to complicate my life or do anything. And then the second thing is, when I'm working on my book, what I like to do, I like to outline my chapters. Now, I know that some Christian writers, okay, and I know, okay, not just Christian writers, so maybe if you're also new to the writing and publishing industry, you may feel that planning and outlining your book isn't really leaving room, it's not leaving room for God, and that's not actually true. If you think about the life of Nehemiah and other people in the Bible as well, it just basically shows you that God is a God of planning. Okay, and this is what your chapter outlines. For me, when I'm basically thinking about and working out my book idea, I often think of myself as some kind of literary Nehemiah. I do my research, and I basically go out there and basically survey the land. And whilst I'm doing that, I am making notes. And this is what outlining your book chapter, essentially, that's my version of that. Okay, preparation is an act of stewardship. Preparing your book and outlining your book doesn't make you any less spiritual. It actually makes you a better author. It makes you, it makes you a better writer, better author, or whatever literary word that you want to use. So I'm just going to share how I essentially outline my book. And by the way, outlining your book doesn't mean that you don't have faith in God. It's nothing to do with that. So I'm just going to share with you guys how I basically outline my book. Right, so let's start with a chapter outline. I know there are some people that are thinking, I don't even know what a chapter outline is meant to look like. Well, congratulations, you're in the right place. So I'm just basically keeping this simple. And because there's a particular font that I like to use. And what you will find out about me is I'm a creature of habits. I'm a creature of habits. Let me just increase that to 100%, much better. So the most important thing when you have, one of the most important things that I do before I start basically writing the book, and you may have seen that previous videos in this series, how I write my book as a Christian from book idea to publication. And like I said, this is video 3. And in video 2, I share with you how I basically play around and validate my book idea with the Christian Book Starter, which is an AI writing tool that I use. And this is the next step after that. If you want to take a look and check out the Christian Book Starter, the link will be in the description. But what it does for me, after using that AI tool to practice my writing styles and my techniques and get feedback on the different writing styles, and also help me to basically flesh out the book idea, the next step for me is writing this book. So in terms, and usually what happens is I would have the summary of the book, which has been generated for me by the Christian Book Starter. I would usually have it on hand. And failing that, if I don't have that, sometimes I like to use my synopsis. I've spoken at length about how I started off in traditional publishing. So I'm just used to writing book synopsis every single time I have a book idea. And if you want me to basically share a video or do a video on that, just drop your comments on there and I'll get that up for you. So when it comes to outlining your book, I think for a lot of people, they try to do too much, okay? The whole point of your chapter outline is essentially, it's meant to give you basically signals. So what I like to do, let's just say chapter 1, what you need to do, just make it nice and simple. So here's what I do. I think about chapter 1. And this is the thinking that I'd like you guys to take through when you're basically working on your chapter outline. You just think, what is the key event in this chapter? And that's all it is when it comes to outlining your book, okay? And this is a basic outline, by the way. There are other types of outlines that I use. Now, there are sometimes if I'm working on a book, I start with one key event and then I follow it up and then I kind of broaden it out a bit. Then I write like 2 or 3 other events. But the whole point, okay, of a chapter, when I'm basically fleshing out my chapter outline, is everything has to lead up. Okay, there's just one key event in the book. So so the key event in this book is, let me see, Jane Smith gets married. That's the key event, okay? That's the key event. And then in terms of the next chapter, let's use bullet points because Abidemi doesn't like chaos. Chapter 1. And then chapter 2. The other key event is she gets divorced. She gets divorced 3 weeks later. It's a bit extreme. By the way, I'm basically making this up. And if you spend any time with me, then you know that this is how, when I'm working in my videos, working my way through storylines, plot lines, and character development, I tend to just make stuff up. But anyway, it's not a bad thing. We're meant to be authors. This is what we do. And then chapter 3, what happens? Chapter 3, let's think about, at this point, I don't want to make this like a cliche. She gets divorced 3 weeks later, and then in chapter 3, what is the number one key event that she does? She goes hiking. Not she goes hiking. She goes hiking and gets lost. In the Scottish Highlands. Yep. So I'm based in the UK, which is why I'm saying this. So you can see how, if you've got this, and this is why I like to flesh out my chapter outlines, okay? I don't know why this is okay. Let me just change the name. I had an idea for another book, but that's fine. Jane Smith chapter outlines. Cool, let's do that. So in chapter 1, the key event is Jane Smith gets married. Chapter 2, the key event is she gets divorced 3 weeks later. Chapter 3, she goes hiking and gets lost in the Scottish Highlands. And that's what you do. Just keep on basically writing this. So when you are, and then blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm not going to go all the way to like 30 or so chapters, by the way. So obviously what this does, it then gives you guys an idea. So before you start writing your book, the reason I personally find it easy to, when I'm writing my book, okay, is I have these chapter outlines. So it's not so much a struggle for me to basically get up and go or start working on my book, because I know exactly what is meant to happen in that chapter. I know the key event. So the key event in chapter 1 is Jane Smith gets married, which is fantastic. But then sometimes what I like to do is then I try to break it down. I have like other minor events. She gets married, notices in church. She gets married, notices in church, notices at the registry. Okay, notices her new husband being weird at the registry. Listen, the whole point about this chapter outline is you can make it as detailed as you want. So obviously this is not like a real book idea, but what I'm saying is the first thing I do, I write the key event in the chapter, which basically means that whatever I write in this particular chapter, it has to basically everything has to lead up to this key event. And what it does, by basically outlining my chapter this way, it kind of grounds me. I don't lose focus. So everything that I write is just basically just honed in on that. You know that whatever happens in chapter 1, Jane Smith gets married. And then what I like to do, I like to go back, okay, and then flesh out the chapter a bit more. She notices her husband being weird at the registry. Okay, and then next thing is, okay, what other minor event? I don't know. They have their first argument. I think all couples can relate to this. Their first argument. Words were said and not taken back. And basically that's it. Then I worked my way through the chapters. Now, I can hear what you guys are saying already. It's okay. I just know that there's somebody out there that's thinking, okay, Abidemi, that's fantastic. So does that mean that when I have this chapter outlines written out, that does that mean that I can't change whatever happens to the book? Of course you can. It's your book. You can do absolutely whatever you want. But what I'm saying is that when people often ask me about, Abidemi, but how do you write your book? This is actually how I start. Okay. I break down the chapters. I have my chapter outlines. The most important thing for me, it's not necessarily like all these kind of what I like to call micro events or micro acts in the chapter. For me, the most important thing essentially is just knowing that, listen, in chapter 1, I know there's one key event, and I know that everything, okay, I may not know how to basically do everything else in terms of I know that, so basically, let me just rephrase that. I know that this is the one key event, so everything else that I write in that chapter has to lead up to this. What this does, okay, I think of it as signposting. And I think of it as signposting. And I use this when I'm writing fiction or non-fiction. And I find it very useful. And then when it actually comes to essentially, oh, shut up, I know that. When it actually comes to actually writing the book itself. So let's go to chapter 1. Now, I know people often ask me, Abidemi, how do you start writing a book? Personally, this is this is going to be weird. I know some people like to write chapter 1. I don't. I just write 1 and then I start writing. Okay? Jane, and then I start writing whatever it is that I want to write, and that's it. And yeah, I just start writing. And essentially, that's how you start writing a book. And the reason I can start writing this book, okay, let me move it to the middle. Great. Let's just pretend this is a real book. So, and the reason, okay, so here we've got the chapter outlines. And here, because people often ask me, Abidemi, how do you start writing a book? And essentially, what I'm trying to get across to you guys here is, listen, what I'm trying to get across to you guys is this. You have so what I'm trying to get across to you guys is I've got my chapter outline, okay? I've got the key events, so the next step is actually writing it. And this is how I start. And this is how I start basically writing a book. I know what's going to happen because I've got my chapter outlines. And then having these chapter outlines as well, what you will also notice, okay, as you're working your way through this chapter outlines, it helps you to see the gaps in your story, okay? It helps you to see the gaps in your story. So when you actually start writing, sometimes you can get kind of off trail, you can get off key. And this chapter outlines is just a way to basically bring you back to where you're supposed to be in terms of your book. So that's it. How do I write my books? I use chapter outlines. How do I start writing my book? I just type in 1 because I don't like typing chapter 1. It's just me. Now for some people, they just do chapter 1. I just like to write 1 because I don't know. I just like to think about numbers when it comes to my chapters, and then I just start writing. So one other thing that I want to share with you guys is this. Guys, when you are writing your book, okay, you need to think about what the purpose of your book is, okay, of your draft. I beg your pardon, the purpose of your draft. The whole point of your draft is this, essentially. The whole point of your draft is just basically for you to get your book out of your head and onto your laptop or whatever you use that you use to type to basically type your manuscript. It's just meant to be, and that's the whole purpose of having your first draft. It's not meant to be perfect, okay? And in terms of how I actually do it, when I actually start typing start writing the book, physically start writing my book, I just keep on going until I type the end. And I just keep on going until I type the end. So when I get to the end of chapter 1, the next time I pick up this book, I will just basically go to chapter 2 and keep on writing. I don't look back. Okay, I do not look back. I don't review what I've written. I don't clean up my typos. I don't do any of that stuff. And to be honest with you, I don't think I need to do any of that stuff because this is a draft and because I know exactly what's going to happen. Okay, because I am following my chapter outline. This is basically what the world will call your North Star. I like to call it my guiding light. Okay, and all of this just makes it easy for me. And because the reason I don't, when I, let's say I write chapter 1, and then the next time I write is, obviously I just pick up, I just start writing chapter 2. The reason I don't go back to edit and rewrite and start checking typos is essentially it slows me down. And having written 11 books, because I'm just basically editing my way through the 11th book, I know for a fact that for someone like that, I know what the purpose of writing my draft is. At this point, I don't want to slow down. I just basically want to get that book out there, get it out of my head and get it out there. And I don't stop until I get to the end. And then when that's done, then I go back and then I start going through everything that I've written. I take my time, and that is when I start checking the typos and doing the self-editing. So I really hope that this helps you, because when I speak to people a lot of the time, because perhaps if you're not, if you don't, when I speak to a lot of people, they just have, especially if they're new to writing and publishing, they always have this overriding feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing. This is a massive mistake. This is just really, really rubbish. And then the next thing they do, they just basically just start deleting everything and starting again, deleting everything and starting again, deleting everything and starting again. So I really do hope that this basically this short insight into how I write my book, I really hope that it helps you. And more than anything else, I hope that it gives you the freedom and the liberty to basically go on and get that first draft out of your head. Okay,